Hello viewers, welcome to Foreign TV USA. You are watching this television. This is an initiative from North America focused on mental health. And mental health stands for 4M. This is mental health, migration, multicultural and language, and also mindfulness. We are practicing mindfulness beyond border. So, welcome to our channel, and this channel you will find in different television, Facebook, YouTube, and also other channels. So, if you like it, you can be connected with us. Your opinions and your connection will encourage us to spread globally mental health from all over the world. Thank you all to watching us. And also the thing is nowadays, WHO already told this no health without mental health. Nowadays, mental health is really a burning issue for us. We know all over the world, every five in people, at least one in their lifetime, they are having some mental health issues. So now is the time to discuss with mental health. And this is the program, actually the journey with global mental health. This is helping us to know all over the world how people are working with mental health and how people are really reaching out for this mental health service, especially people who are in adverse situation. Because we know, like in general situation, when people are having problem, every 15 to 20 people, at least one, but in adverse situation, people are getting it doubled, increasing the mental health issues. So we have to deal with it. So the thing is, the mental health is the now issue to all the people for their well-being. This is not only the only discussion about the problem, but also it helps us to deal with our well-being, our mindfulness, our here and now practicing to live with mindfully for our each and every task. So now I am going to introduce myself. This is Mahmouda. I am a mental health specialist. I am working with an international NGO from many more years, and also I am serving for these people who are in adverse situation. We will learn also many more things in this program because this is the first episode from our program. We will be continuing these things, and I am very happy to introduce to our guest today, Dr. Max Levis Trader. He will also introduce himself because he is also spreading mental health through art. So nowadays we are practicing healing and well-being through different platforms, not only art, dancing, mindfulness, meditation, yoga. So we are connecting everything. Today we will be learning how art can be connected with mental health. So please, Max, welcome on board, and please continue.
Thank you, Mahmouda. What an honor and a pleasure to be able to join you with such an essential dialogue, really at essential time in history. So to give a little bit of background on myself, my name is Dr. Max Frieder. I am the executive director and co-founder of Artolution. And Artolution is an international, locally led, community-based public art education organization that works specifically in emergency settings, traumatized communities, refugee camps, conflict zones. And our main focus is being able to train local artists who are refugees living in these refugee camps, or who are the populations who've been through these mass traumas, who then are able to actually learn how to work with children and families and teenagers, to be able to discuss the mental health issues within their lives, to be able to actually create stories, to be able to paint large-scale public murals and build interactive percussive sculptures, doing puppetry, performance, dance, really is a way of being able to have locally led initiatives where artists who've been through that trauma are able to then heal both themselves, but also are able to facilitate healing within children. And we've done this, and just to give a skill and how I met Mahmouda, is that we met working in the Rohingya refugee camps on the border of Myanmar in Bangladesh, where we have a team of over 30 Rohingya and Bangladeshi artists. We work in the South Sudanese refugee camps, in the largest refugee settlement in Africa, and the border of South Sudan and Uganda. We have a program running on the border of Syria, working in Jordan, as well as working in Lebanon, Lebanon, and then we are working currently in Colombia on the border of Venezuela. So all of these different initiatives and each of these different teams, we have over 80 artists around the world doing this year round. The focus is that mental health is a right, that the right to creativity is essential to be able to both internalize and externalize the traumas that people face, and that we need to find ways where this can be happening from a locally led model, where we can have local people understanding what the idioms of distress are, understanding how that can exist within a local context, and then be able to then be spread through a training of trainers model, and being able to have those in the community who really are the experts on their own culture, being able to find the most inspirational, inspiring, and maybe most importantly, profound ways of developing connections, mindfulness, and ways of being able to find meaning within our lives.
Mm. Thank you, Max. This is very good, brief introduction. For us, actually, I would like to know a bit more. Like as you mentioned, everywhere you are contextualizing this evolution, you are connecting with your local people. So, can you please explain, like when you include them, how they can release their traumatic event through this art, like the context, theme, how did you select the theme, and how can people feel better? If you can give us a more bit detailed example from the community, from anywhere. You mentioned South Sudan, Venezuela, and also like South Sudan, and also you have mentioned Bangladesh Rohingya community, and also Colombia. So you can tell us like, okay, very specific example, so that people can learn and can be inspired. Because like art, people sometimes they cannot understand where is the connection. So if mental health people can understand this thing, so that they can also seek for this, they can look for you as well. Yes, thank you.
Exactly. Mahmoud, well, first of all, I want to focus on thanking you for asking that, because I really do believe that we need to find the right vocabulary to describe the implications of mental health work through creativity in the arts in the sphere of global mental health. I think it's essential. I work closely with the Global Mental Health Lab, working with Dr. Lena Verdelli, who's an amazing expert who's given a lot of time and effort in helping us cultivate a mental health approach. So to answer your question, it really comes down to our curriculum, to our methodology. So for us, we have an entire training program that we deploy to be able to have artists and folks who may have never come from an artistic background understanding how to be able to facilitate civic dialogue, collaborative engagement, and being able to have social cohesion as an integral part of how we discuss mental health in a realistic way. Now, what does that, as you said, actually look like in these different contexts? What is an actual manifestation of this some very difficult issues, right? These are not easy things, whether it be losing your home or losing your family, or physical or sexual violence, or some of the major issues that come from the kinds of conflicts that we work in. So one of the things that's the most essential part of our work is that when we go in to do these trainings, to be able to build these teams, what's so important is teaching local folks how to facilitate dialogues with children, adolescents, and families. So that comes through actually having adults being able to learn how to get kids to make drawings about both the trauma they've been through, but also the resilience, about what they want to see for their future, about behavioral ideation of the future, right? That I have the right to have a future, right? These types of ideas, being able to facilitate dialogues based on very important concepts with children, let's say, or with adolescents. And then all the kids make drawings, right? So they all make drawings of what's most important in their lives. And then we have a discussion. How can we take all of those different concepts and put them together into a single composition, one story, one narrative that's able to embody the opinions, the feelings, the emotions, and the social and emotional well-being of the children and adolescents into a single collaborative mural? And then that mural becomes an artifact. It becomes something that actually is created by all of these different people together, that then is able to continue to live within these communities, that especially in places that have been through severe trauma. So to explain, Mahmoud, maybe what does that actually look like, right? Like one example. we were working in the Rohingya refugee camps in Balukale and Kutupalong. For
Mhm.
those who don't know, it is the largest refugee camp in the history of all of humanity to have ever been existed. And we've been working there since August of 2017, since the major influx happened. And one of the and maybe a story that would be wonderful to share, Mahmouda, would be that when we went there and we started working there, we started looking for artists, and people said there are no artists here, that people were not allowed to be artists in Myanmar because they would be killed if they were caught expressing themselves in public ways. And we ended up having one woman who was working with us, and this woman, her name is Dildar Begum. And Dildar actually had, when she fled Rakhine State, she had a severe trauma. She had a lot of her family members killed, and her husband. She doesn't know if he's alive or dead. And when she was fleeing, she actually had to dig holes in the ground and then cover herself with dirt during the day. And then during the night, she would run with her grandmother and her two special needs brothers. She ended up getting to the Naf River and being able to create a raft out of reeds and float across. And when she got to the Rohingya camps in Bangladesh, she had what we call within the trauma specialist field, she had what we call shock based mutism, which meant that she, from the shock of what she experienced, she actually couldn't speak. And she did not speak for about 9 months, and she started working on one of our programs, working with women who had been through violence. And she was silent. And as she started working with us, she spoke for the first time in 9 months in our program. And what she said,
Excellent.
the first words to come out of her mouth, the first words that Dildar said when she was painting with us, she said, I need to help others get out of their silence.
Yeah.
That my responsibility as a woman who has been through this trauma is to, and as someone who felt that I was not even alive, my responsibility is to go to other women and to girls and to share my experience with them so that they are able to come out of their trauma and out of their mutism and their silence, and to be able to tell their stories, to be able to express themselves and say that they matter, that they are here, and who they are matters to the world and to history. And after 2.5 years of training and work, she is now one of our lead artists, and she is leading our programs in the Rohingya refugee camps. And Dildar now is working every single day with women and girls to be able to have them tell their stories. So we can see how she went from being a victim of trauma to becoming a
Mhm.
survivor, and becoming a survivor of trauma to becoming an agent of social change. And then she transformed from becoming an agent of social change into a maker of history. And those cycles, that four-pronged cycle, we really believe that we need to inspire those to believe that they feel they can make their own history. And if you can make your own history, then the mental health implications of identity, efficacy, agency are truly transformative.
Thank you, Max. This is really very good and excellent example to know how mental health actually can be worked with this art. And also, like from our view as well, for mental health, we are using different creative art therapy. In this art therapy, also, when we are working with children or the adolescents, we are doing something very similar. That is like we are asking them to picture at least with something which has been creating the traumatic event in their mind and giving them negative energy and pressure. So when we are asking to paint it, and they when they are doing these things, after that they are feeling a bit relaxed, because it gives them some sort of healing, because they are painting something what is coming in their mind which they cannot explain, or to share with some other people, especially in this situation. People cannot share because they don't find someone. In this adverse situation, people are not getting time, and when they are painting something with this pencil or the sketching,
Yeah.
and then they are finding themselves like they are involving with some task, it is giving them some sort of healing. At the same time, they are releasing themselves when they are painting these things. So thank you, Max, for this great example. At the same time, I would like to know a bit more about the evolution, how you can involve this community people and the procedure, how you are choosing people. Yeah, thank you, Max.
Thank you, Mahmouda. I really appreciate it. Donobad, since we're talking about Bangladesh and Shukriya.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, of course, and thank you so much. We really appreciate you. So, that's an excellent question, Mahmouda. It's an excellent question. And so the answer that I would give is that we have our work, Art Illusion's work, has art therapy as an embedded part of the practice. However, what we're doing is actually a bit more of a communal activation that's relatively groundbreaking within the education and emergency spaces, within the global mental health spaces, within the communication for development space or the communication with communities space. That what we do is actually a very different methodological process. The methodology is very different than conventional art therapy. So for us, we believe in art therapeutic practices. We deeply believe in this. However, we ourselves actually classify what we do as education. And there's a very clear reason why. Many people feel very stigmatized about mental health concerns, discussing issues about trauma, about mental illness, about addiction, or issues that are very stigmatized and tabooed. Can be very difficult to talk to different individuals about, especially in very sensitive locations that we work in, like the Rohingya camps, South Sudanese camps, the Syrian camps. Mental health is very stigmatized. So what we found is that if we call it not art therapy, but we call it education, then everybody wants to be involved. It becomes a purely inclusive, safe space. And what we found is that by using art therapeutic practices embedded within an art education umbrella, what we found is that it gets people to want to be involved at all levels. So whether it be the children or their older brothers and sisters, their parents or grandparents, we have a completely inclusive communal space. So what that means is that when we are doing a public activation, all of our work is public. So what that means is that we believe those drawings that those children do, let's say who have just fled the conflict in South Sudan, right? And they're making drawings about the horrific civil war and the tribal warfare that exists between the different regions of South Sudan. When they're making those drawings, you're right, Mahmouda. People develop this calm. There's an amazing theorist named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he has this theory called the creative flow. And what he says, which really answers your question, Mahmouda, is that when we discuss mental health and creativity and expression, that when somebody gets into a creative flow, their cognition and their way of processing trauma, processing time and the passing of time, processing communication and comfort levels or social and emotional connections, that all of this together actually changes when we are making art. That creativity in the arts actually shifts perspectives. It shifts the way that we interact. And that shift actually has incredible implications for being able to address issues that nothing else in the world can address. And that what we believe is that if we can take the idea that communities can take those very same drawings, Mahmouda, that you said, right? These beautiful drawings that children and families can make. And then we take that, and instead of just leaving them as an ends as a drawing, we can actually take those drawings and transform them into a beautiful piece of artwork that can live in a community that actually engages people to empower themselves. And it engages people to be able to have a civic gift that gets to live in their communities. So then, those children who may feel themselves to be worthless, who may believe the issues of depression or of issues of feeling that they themselves do not have the right to have, for example, a dream, right? The right to have a dream is essential for mental health. And what we found is that the minute that dream is no longer just on a little piece of paper, but is on a giant wall in the middle of a refugee camp or on the giant wall at a medical health clinic or at a child-friendly space or at a women-friendly space. It takes our ideas and takes the ideas of those who've been through trauma and it puts it into reality. It puts it into a reality where they can go to their families and say, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a doctor. My dream is that I want our communities to be able to come together in peace. right? The minute that we can externalize these types of mental health based concerns, it brings it into reality. And what we believe is that if we can take this methodology of having communities facilitating their own children and families to tell their stories, that actually needs to be at the forefront of crisis response rather than an add-on at the end. It needs to be something that at the beginning can be part of protection. It can be part of mental health and psychosocial support and well-being. It can be part of education in all the sectors. And that what we believe is that if we can do this on an ongoing and scalable basis, then we can have artists and teams all over the world doing this in every refugee and traumatic crisis in the world as an ongoing and scalable response to mental health concerns.
Mm. Thank you, Max. Very nice to know this thing. Now, I am asking like a different question that is like, we already mentioned 4M, we are working with like 4M, mental health, migration, and also multi-language and cultural mindfulness. So now I would like to know, like you are working in different countries all over the world, Syria, South Sudan, Bangladesh, and also in Colombia. So can you please explain? You might have some experience on this multi-language and culture and how people are perceiving this, because I have been working with Rohingya refugees. I have a view like, okay, people are not very good or interested on art, like somehow they have some stigma about these things, might be the religious and also the cultural view. How do you minimize these things, because this is a great work? So I'm really interested to know, like, how do you differ? Might be you can share with us, like in different countries, how they are taking this and how you are overcoming these challenges. It would be really great for us to know and for the audiences as well. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, Mahmouda, yet again, that is a phenomenal question. And I actually see, if you'll believe it, our Rohingya team is watching this broadcast right now. So in real time, I'm getting messages telling me, we love what you're watching, we love what you're saying. So we can see the connections that are able to exist and the meaningful connections that are possible. Now, I want to answer your question really clearly because I think it's actually a very challenging answer to that. So one of the things that's essential is a local contextualization. So when we say that, what that means is that if you're having local artists and educators leading these initiatives, then they're able to understand what are going to potentially be the challenges we're going to face. So I'll use a couple of case studies to be able to explain what does that actually look like. Because for us, if it's not something that's loved by the community, then it doesn't actually achieve its intended goal, right? The goal is that it can empower community, can inspire resilience, it can, inspire a profound sense of connection and oneness within different folks who may feel very isolated. And social isolation is, of course, such a major issue within the 4Ms that you discussed. So what we've really found, and I think this is important, is that you have to work with local community leaders. So for us, in the Rohingya camps, we work with the imams, we work with the local majis, we work with different community leaders to make sure that whatever we make will be accepted and embraced by the community. And that takes a huge ranging different sense of perspectives. So for example, in one imam say, yes, paint whatever you want, this is beautiful, we love what you do. And another imam may say, actually, no, this is right across the street from a madrasa, so we do not feel comfortable with people or animals being shown. Can you instead paint patterns and mosques, for example? And so we will adapt our strategy according to what is appropriate within the local context. What we found is that if it's being initiated by local artists, local leaders are far more excited to support it, number one. And number two, if they see the children of their own community be loving, painting and being excited and being happy and joyful, it's actually something that really transforms expectations. People many times have very negative interpretations of the controversial nature of the arts. They may feel that arts are useless or purposeless, or that they do not have a role to play. And yet what we found is that once people see what's possible, then that same imam picks up a paintbrush and comes and paints right alongside us. right? And I think that's really important, is that inclusive, safe space that can actually develop entirely new paradigms of understanding. So, for example, if we look to the Syria conflict of our work in the Azraq refugee camp, one of the things that we found is that, number one, we actually always need to work with our organizational partners. So whether it be UNHCR, who Mahmouda is a foremost expert in the world with, UNICEF or the Red Cross or IOM or UNFPA or the International Rescue Committee. We work with dozens and dozens of different humanitarian aid organizations, and each of them has their own local organizations that they work with. So in Bangladesh, working with BITA or Agujatra or Bangladesh Betar or any of the local organizations, BRAC, Kodak, that we work with, they're the ones who understand what the local expectations are. And you can't come in and expect that it's going to be the same in the Syria conflict as it will be in the Rohingya conflict or with the South Sudanese or the Venezuelan conflict. Every different environment requires different approaches. And so when you ask, well, what are the challenges? What we found is that the challenges are different in each space. And that's really important to acknowledge each context. And for example, in Colombia, one of the biggest issues that we face is what we call fronteras invisibilidades, which means invisible frontiers and invisible borders. And what we found is that in the communities we'll work in one community, and it will be divided by an invisible border where one gang will control this area and a different gang will control this area. And that if you cross that line at the wrong time and you're the wrong person, you can get killed, you can get shot. So for us, we had to actually structure our entire workshops to be able to function within two separate spaces, to be able to serve children in two separate sides of a conflict. We've done the same thing in the Rohingya camps or the Syrian camps. So, for example, if we take an extreme example that might be able to come to a nice kind of conclusion for you, Mahmouda, for your next question, is we were working with the children of ISIS, with the children of Daesh in the Syria conflict. And it was these are kids who've been through such horrific trauma, more than any of us could ever imagine in many ways. And what we found is there was one of our artists, Muhammad Ibrahim. And I think if we talk about the four M's, right, that this short story answers everything about what we believe the arts have in relationship to mental health. So if we imagine the story of Dildar in our minds, and Dildar is sitting with us here, holding space for her story about her shock-based mutism and her resilience, I want to hold space for a second person, and that's Muhammad Ibrahim. Muhammad Ibrahim is one of our lead artists on the Syria conflict who fled Daraa, who fled the horrific conflict there. He was shot multiple times trying to flee into northern Jordan from southern Syria. And when he crossed into the border, he ended up going into Adra camp, and I started working with him. Incredibly talented artist, got a degree at the University of Damascus. One of the most inspiring people I've ever met in my entire life, who is now currently in Lebanon. Now, Muhammad Ibrahim, I was sitting next to him, and he was sitting next to me. And I had a conversation as we're painting with these beautiful Syrian children from Hama, Homs, Daraa, Aleppo, Damascus. And we're sitting and he looks at me in the face and he says, Max, what is the most difficult question you've ever been asked in your life? I said, well, Muhammad Ibrahim, that's a very difficult question. I don't know. How about for you? He said, the hardest question I've been asked is when my 4-year-old son asked me, why are people trying to kill us? Yeah. And he said, I answered him by saying, I don't know why people are trying to kill us, but we don't hate anybody. And he says, Max, I've seen people not being able to, I've seen my son, who's 4 years old, not able to have food, not able to have water, who was starving, who was close to dying. My 3 children that he had. And I wasn't able to give them food or water. And then he looked me in the eyes and he said, every day is better than the last. And I said, what made you say that, Muhammad Ibrahim? And he says, because we are still alive. And the only thing that gives my life meaning is that I am able to make art with children, and that they're able to see this light, the light of art. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that this light of art is something more magic than anything else in the whole world. And I think those words of Muhammad Ibrahim explain more than I ever could the value of what arts can inspire for mental health.
Yeah. Exactly, like what you mentioned, just we as a mental health people, also we always try to say these things like you are not alone, we are with you, and also still we are alive. This is the thing, like how we can make our life more meaningful. This is what we try to do these things. And also when people can understand these things, this ownership or this the sense of being alive give them hope, joy, and also it can help also them to help others, to help themselves, to increase their self-esteem, and also to understand the meaning of their life. So here the mental health actually works. And today actually we could know from you how art can play a vital role on like spreading mental well-being, mindfulness, and other things to work with the multi-language and culture. We learn many things from you as well. Thank you, Max. And also now I would like to know a bit more about your experience. Like you have mentioned many things, how art illusion actually works. Now I am interested, like how you are being involved with this art illusion, and how you started your journey, how you felt like okay, mental health and art illusion can be a great work and great impact on the global mental health. And also this is not only the adverse situation but also for our individual life, people who are in trauma, who are in like any kind of decision or irregulation of the emotion, they can use this art. So you can like tell us your inspiration, your journey. It will also help us to know more people can be involved, more people can learn from you. Thank you, Max.
Amazing. Oh, thank you, Mahmouda. Well, I think in order to describe that feeling, I think sometimes it's more of a sensation than anything else in the world, right? For us, you were talking about different languages. We are big believers in multi literacy based learning. So when I say literacy, I don't necessarily mean languages. I mean being able to have auditory learning, having tactile learning, having oral learning, having learning that comes through our hands, through our minds, through our voices, right? And being able to have learning come through all different ways then can actually translate into mental health and well-being. So what we found is that so first I'll answer your first question and then I'll give you a little background on myself. So the first question is that we actually truly believe that in the future of the history of the world and the future in the history of emergency and crisis response, that we need to bring together all of the different sectors to create an intersectoral approach that utilizes the arts as a cross-cutting way of making people care and making people care in all different ways. So there's an amazing theorist that I want to bring up who writes about things that I think are very connected to trauma. And his name is Dr. Cornel West. And one of the things that Dr. Cornel West writes about, who actually had an amazing conversation with Shuja Uddin, our country manager in Bangladesh, about this very issue in the Rohingya crisis and their trauma, which is this idea that he had a quote in 2017 that Dr. West said, which is, the only reason I am who I am is because somebody loved me, because somebody cared about me, right? So, this idea of developing, establishing, and cultivating a culture of care, right? The idea that Mahmouda, I care about you, that the words that you say matter to me. And that if we can inspire others and have teams of people who are able to inspire a culture of care, that this is able to then spread through creativity, expression, the arts, while being able to deploy important goals about education, about mental health and psychosocial well-being, about protection issues or issues about gender-based violence prevention and equity. That we find that if we're able to make people care about each other, then that actually is a catalyst for dealing with some extraordinarily challenging issues. So we believe what we do to actually be a complementary program So what that means is that there's a joint response plan where everybody comes up with ideas, all the different organizations come up with a concept of how they're going to make an impact. We believe that the arts can help to further those impacts, right? So being aware about food distribution or food security, being able to understand about the importance of communities being able to communicate with themselves, for example, and being able to know how to do this in the most effective way possible. That this is something that is it's not a small element. It can actually become a major component of how we develop strategies to being able to make life better for those who've been through trauma. Right. Now, as far as me personally, uh, that goes down a little bit of a different path. I myself am an artist. I've been an artist since I was born, and I was incredibly engaged with this idea of how the arts can transform lives. The idea that arts can actually become a catalyst for transformation of expectations, of sensations, of maybe what we think we can accomplish, and that we have more talent than we thought. So I come from a fine arts background. I got my degree in the arts, and then I started working internationally, and I started working with my co-founder and my partner Joel Bergner, and we really brought our two expertise together. Really, from him coming from a social work background, me coming from an art education background, and we brought it together, and we basically decided that we needed to find ways of not just us as two different guys who were coming from different parts of the states. We needed to have local people leading this for themselves on an ongoing, sustainable, and scalable basis. Because we've met the most talented, incredible artists who just happen to be born in the wrong country at the wrong time. Right? They just happen to have been born in Butidong or in Mongdao in Rakhine State, and they happen to have been born in a community that was being horrifically oppressed, and they happen to have had to flee. But that doesn't mean that they aren't the most talented artists in the world. That doesn't mean that they don't have incredible potential. It just means that they were unfortunately born in the wrong circumstance. So what we believe is that if we can find ways to get these people to have access to the education, the skills, and the ability to be able to facilitate mental health and well-being, right? In order to use the arts to be able to feel that we have meaning in the world, right? To feel that we are not worthless, to feel that who you are matters, that you can have a mindfulness practice, right? Or that we can connect to one another, that Bangladeshi and Rohingya can come together, that Syrian and Jordanian can come together, that South Sudanese and Ugandan can come together, or that Venezuelan and Colombian can come together. We believe, and it's really essential. I've learned in my own perspective that so much of the time is when you take it really seriously, it many times people will not necessarily engage in a way that will be able to impact all levels of society. And so I say that in that we believe that, and I truly have come to understand that children are the soul of the universe, that children are our greatest sages. So how can we get the voices of children to be an equitable level to their parents and grandparents? And what we found is that artists, especially that local artists and educators, can facilitate spaces where we can actually get children, older brothers and sisters, parents, uncles and aunties, and grandparents all sitting together, being on an equal playing field, and then together discussing mental health issues. When that happens, when you have children, and the reason that can happen is because it's fun, because it's something that makes people smile, because it's something that brings people joy, it makes people happy. And I think, if you're asking where did I feel this? I think stories seem to be a very good way to communicate mental health implications. So maybe I'll finish answering your question with a story, Mahmouda. And just because you're an expert in the Rohingya crisis, which is where I did my doctorate, I spent 5 years doing research for the Rohingya crisis with Teachers College at Columbia University. This is one of the stories that came out of our publication that I will condense it, but I think you'll really appreciate
Yes,
this one.
exactly. Like you might know, like we were also working with the University of Columbia. We are also doing the same, like scalable psychological
Yep.
intervention. We adopted it one interpersonal psychotherapy as well for this Rohingya. This is actually the great place to work and to find people. Actually, people are mostly vulnerable over there. So this is, I think, like the place where we can also serve, we can learn, we can exchange, and we can also implement all over the world by learning from this community. It gives us a lot of things.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And the study, if you, I think, I don't know if you know this, Mahmouda, I imagine you do. So that study that you're doing at Teachers College at Columbia, which is with Dr. Lena Verdelli, she actually came and
Exactly.
saw, so she was on my dissertation committee. She was
Yes,
my second
Amar.
reader, which is like amazing. And she actually
Yes.
came and visited our programs, and she saw our art village where we established the first art center in the history of the Rohingya culture in Village 4 Extension and in Camp 4 Extension. And she actually came and visited our programs. Now, I had a conversation with Dr. Verdelli, and this is the story I told her, and she told me this epitomizes why the arts matter to mental health. The story I'm about to tell, and if we look at her perspective, Dr. Lena Verdelli's perspective, I think it made me realize how important this story I'm about to tell is. So we were doing a program working in, at the time it was called Camp SS. It was a relatively remote camp within the Rohingya camps, and we were doing a program where we were working in one of the child-friendly spaces, a CFS. And what
Mhm.
I did is I went to one of the actually garment factories that was in Cox's Bazar. It was between Cox's Bazar and Moshkali, and an area in Bangladesh. And what I did is we actually collected offcuts of fabric that had been thrown away to be burned. For those who've been to Bangladesh, you know that a lot of the fabric that isn't used, ends up being thrown in the trash. So we got bags and bags of this fabric, and we brought it into the CFS, into the child-friendly space, to be able to do a mask making workshop where I taught the children about how to make masks and how to make costumes, and it was a really special experience. And what we ended up doing, which was so unique, was that I brought it into the child-friendly space, and they take this, and what do they start doing? They take it and they start throwing it up in the air, right? They start dancing, they start singing, right? It becomes this kind of this way of being able to have joy. And all of a sudden, right on the entrance of the child friendly space, we end up seeing that there was about 12 very stern looking men, right? They had the long beards, they were very religious. One of them looked to be the imam, one of them was the local maji, and they did not look particularly happy, right? They looked very serious at these children who were yelling and playing and dancing and singing, and they looked very, very serious. And I got very nervous that we may have done something offensive to the local community. And one man walks into the CFS. He kind of looks at what's going on, still no smiles. He walks up to the children and he picks up a piece of the fabric and looks at it. And he ends up actually taking a handful of the fabric and he starts throwing it up and he starts singing and dancing, right? And then all the men come and they all start grabbing the fabric and they start throwing it up and start singing and dancing, right? And then what ends up happening is it bursts out of the child friendly space, and the children and all of these men are taking these just offcuts of fabric, trash, throwing it up in the air, and they start singing traditional Rohingya songs. And the women in the full burqas, right, they come and they start tying the fabric around their head and they start throwing it up in the air. And you could tell that these people were so thirsty, they were so hungry for a reason to celebrate, for a reason to have joy in their lives, any reason to have joy. So you look at something as simple as taking a piece of fabric and throwing it up in the air, right? That in itself was a reason to celebrate. And that
Mhm.
very simple short story explains that if we can use simple ideas about play, about imagination, about being able to use expression and use the arts as a way to liberate the mind, to
Mhm.
emancipate the mind, that those who may be in an extreme trauma. I mean, this was in August, September of 2017 when this happened. This is right when people crossed over the border. These are people who had just fled, the ethnic cleansing. And yet these are the people who actually have the most social capital to be able to transform their own communities. Right? These are the people who have the most potential. The people who've been through the most trauma are the people who have the most potential and the most social ability to transform their own communities. So when we start changing the paradigm and understand that it's not only trauma specialists like Mahmouda and myself, but that Mahmouda and myself, that when we can inspire local communities who've been through that trauma to be able to heal their own psychological well-being, to find their own interpersonal psychotherapy methodologies and to find their own ways of healing, that actually they have the greatest potential to heal their own communities, and that the arts can play a major role in that process.
Thank you, Max. It was really very nice and amazing discussion, and we could learn many more things from you. You know, right now I am in Afghanistan. I'm working here for the uh, IDPs and returnees, and also very few refugees. And also, you are, I think, right now you are in Italy. So, I would like to know, like, do you have any activities here in Afghanistan? Did you do anything, or do you have any plan? Because you know, in Afghanistan, people are really very conservative, and their context is really
Sure,
difficult because they say war-prone areas, people cannot move.
of course.
So, and also, I think beyond their imagine, like how art can be effective. I especially don't have very good idea on this. So, can you please
Sure.
give us, yes, some ideas, and you can share with us? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I would love to. So, Afghanistan. First, I'll say, inshallah. I hope to work there. I think that it's an essential place. We've been invited quite a few times, but we're hoping that one day we might be able to make that come to life, especially considering the need. Now, for a second, focusing on Afghanistan, I worked extensively with a lot of Afghani refugees in Moria, in the Greek refugee camps, and in the
Mhm.
Samos refugee camps as well, which was in Greece, and then in the Calais jungle, and even here in Italy and in France, there's a lot of folks who come from Afghanistan. Now, one of the things that's really important is if someone has survived, let's say, the Taliban, right? Then they need to feel that there's an alternative, right? And I think that's really important. So some of the work that we've done is actually classified as de-radicalization or preventing violent extremism. And one of the things that we do is we truly believe that if children and teenagers view themselves to have an alternative, then there are other worlds that they can build, right? And there are worlds that they can build that they have to be able to see and feel that it's possible. They have to feel that everything that they've known, which might be that they feel that they are, that they do not have enough food, they may not have enough water or electricity, that they feel that they do not have freedom of movement or freedom of safety or freedom of education, that if you can do something as simple as take a single pencil and explain who you are, why you exist, what matters to you, right? That simple process of saying I am here, I matter, especially for girls and especially for women, more than anyone else, to be able to make that statement of identity is something that cannot be taken as a small deal. That is something that is hugely substantial. And I say that because one of the biggest things that we found, I found this in Afghani refugees, and I definitely found it in our work with the Rohingya, is this idea that girls and women feel that they have the right to have a dream, right? That they have the right to have any dream in the whole world they could ever imagine. So I remember there was one little girl who said, I don't have a dream. And I said, well, if you could have a dream, what would it be? And she
Mm.
said, well, I would love to be a doctor, except that here no Rohingya women can become doctors. Right? I remember she said that to me. And I
Mhm.
said, well, why can't you be the first doctor? Right? And she said, yeah, I can be the first doctor. Right? So you look at that very simple shift in cognition, that very simple shift in an externalization of understanding that maybe something is greater than we thought was possible. And then the
Yes.
mental health implications of this are substantial. Now, I also want to say, Mahmouda, I believe that if we were to one day work in Afghanistan, the most important thing would be to find Afghani artists, right?
Yeah.
Afghani artists. And so I'm working with a wonderful. I've been working for a long time. I have a good friend named Omaid, who heads up a partner, a sister organization of ours, called Art Lords. And Art Lords is a wonderful Afghani-based arts organization, and so we're hoping one day to work with them. They've invited me many times to work with them. So, inshallah, we work with them in the future. But one of the things I talked about with them is that we, especially women, and I'm going to focus on this really clearly, we need to have women leaders, and we need
Mm.
to have women leaders and women artists who are able to show that this is possible. So, for example, let's continue with that girl who said, "Well, there are no Rohingya doctors," right?
Yeah.
And this girl, after she said that, she went over to one of our artists. She went over to Muhammad Noor, and then she went over to Ayla, one of our female artists, and she
Mhm.
said, "I didn't know that women were allowed to be artists. I didn't know that women could be artists. I'd never seen a woman be an artist. Yet you, Ayla, are a female artist. So if a woman can be an artist, maybe a woman can be a doctor,
Yes.
right?" And so you look at that mentality, you look at that, the psychological implications of this, the mental health implications for that one little girl is substantial. And how did we get there? We
Mhm.
got there with a piece of pencil, a pencil and a piece of paper. We got there by her taking a brush and painting that drawing of her as a doctor on a wall, right?
Yeah.
And then we got there by her bringing her family, her mother and her father, to the wall and pointing at the wall and saying, "This is what I am going to be when I grow up." Right? And what was amazing is at the time we were doing a study with UNICEF, called "Art Brings Light to Darkness." And one of the implications of this work, which I'd highly recommend everyone follow our work at artolution.org, and check us on Instagram and Facebook, where you can see the study. And Mahmouda, this is a good ending to your question. What the study started to find was that the attendance to education programs
Mhm.
drastically rose after a art space intervention was implemented. So after
Mhm.
we painted a mural on a wall, that children and families wanted to come to the spaces more because it was their space, right?
Yeah.
So that girl came to that space far more often because she would come there to look at the paintings she painted of herself as a doctor, right?
Yes.
So we look at the implications on one very simple act, right? A little girl taking a brush and painting an image of herself as a doctor. Yet the mental implications of this are profound. Right? And I think we have to look at little small examples to imagine how we can scale this to different crisis contexts around the world. And I'm actually, if you'll believe this, Mahmouda, after I'm here, I'm going first to Bosnia, doing a program with IOM, with refugees and migrant and immigrants who've come to Bosnia. And then after that, I'm going to Geneva to hopefully, I'm going to be negotiating a memorandum of understanding, a contract, hoping to
Mhm.
scale our programs to all the major crisis contexts in the world with UNHCR. So we are working very hard to make that happen. But if we think about that one little girl, right, that one little girl, I think her story is what can kind of show what's possible.
Okay. Thank you, Max. We learned a lot from you. Yes, we are the end of our program. So finally, this is an honor for us as well to have you a guest from our program, and it helps a lot. I do believe our program people are learning a lot, and also our viewers also they have learned a lot from you. So now I would like to ask, like, if you want to ask me something, if you have in your mind, you can ask. Yes.
I do, Mahmoud. I have a question for you. So you are an incredible advocate of mental health globally. Dr. Verdelli has spoken so highly of you in our conversations. As has the head of MHPSS globally, Peter Ventenvogel. Dr. Ventenvogel has spoken so highly of you, Mahmouda. So I have the most respect for you of anyone in the entire world. So I want to start by saying that. Now, here's my question for you: is that you've worked all over the globe. You've worked as a mental health specialist in very difficult contexts. And you're also very forward thinking. I know that you're looking for new ways of being able to inspire mental health and well-being. So if you could imagine for the future, kind of the history of mental health and psychosocial well-being, how do you imagine that arts can be implemented in every crisis context in the world? How do you imagine that the arts can have a role from a mental health perspective?
Thank you very much. I already heard from you your views, but now I can tell you like yes, exactly. So I do believe what you have already mentioned that scalable psychological intervention. This is one of the way, like evidence based,
Yes.
culture context based. So as I mentioned, mental health itself it is cross cutting. It exists everywhere and also exists nowhere. This is the thing. And also like when we are calling it cross cutting, this is the one issue, and another one is this is post emergency, so
Right.
people are counting it like in second line need. This is not the first line need. But
Right.
when we are working with mental health, we are trying to focus, because when we are focusing on health and mental health, it should be parallelly. So we are trying to make it mainstreaming. And also for mental health, at the beginning I have already mentioned, like mental health not only working with only the clinical intervention. We are working with like different modules, different modalities, with art, with dance, with meditation, with yoga, with mindfulness, with like any kind of recreational activities, with sports. So art is one of the important component nowadays. We are thinking might be what can we do, as already we have discussed a few things, but still there are some things we can include them, like to have a general baseline or study
Yeah.
on cultural needs at the beginning, because we have to know the cultural context. This is really important. You have already mentioned you involved in that areas, imams, majis, or the community champions, and also community thought, how they are thinking. So we can know first, this is the information, how can we collect. And also you mentioned the another important part, female, the community people, and especially adolescents, youth,
Yeah.
they are the main empowering part, because they have the most creativity. They can think alternatively. They can take the challenges. So we have to select this target group first, and then again like to like the specific gender group, and then also the community leaders. Then we can have a conversation, negotiation, and the power and potentiality of that community
Right.
people, how. So I think like this could be the step by step we can initially involve. And also first we can work with their brain, like why art is necessary, how it can gives us healing power. Because when you are painting something, this is simple. You are writing, you are drawing something, it is giving you mental heal. You are getting inspiration. You are spending some time with joy, with hope. Might be you have a long time desire. As you mentioned, the Rohingya first lady, I could be the first doctor. This was my desire. Like I had never been this opportunity to write down somewhere, to tell to people. This is the platform. I can sketch this, my dream, my like what I want to be. So slowly in this way, we can be more integrated with art and mental health. This is a great opportunity, I think. And also mental health, not only the clinical intervention, this is just spreading all over the world with other components. So I find like art is another good opportunity. If we can work, it would be helpful. And also Max, we are happy that you are working on this. Salute to you. And then I think, yes, we are going to end this program. So
Mm.
Max, again I am thanking to you. And also we are happy, and later we hope we will be getting you always. You will be with us. It's an honor and pleasure for us, and thank you for Foreign TV USA to be with us. Thank you, Max.
Thank you so much, Mahmouda. I really, really appreciate the time to be able to talk about these essential issues. I just have to, excuse me, I have to say how much I appreciate the effort that you've made to be able to embrace the arts and mental health. And if we imagine that there's a pyramid of mental health and psychosocial
Yes.
support, and that each layer has its own specific role, we are that second layer, which is a community and family support
Community.
structure,
Yes.
right? And I wanted to bring that up as a conclusion, because if we imagine that community and family support structures, what we believe is that if we use the arts, especially with amazing groups like UNHCR who can deploy this globally, we need to develop resilient strategies to future traumas. We know there will be more traumas. We know there will be more mental health challenges. So we need to develop resilient responses. So when that trauma comes, these communities are prepared to be able to develop both a response that's very holistic and important, but also that maybe can be a renaissance, right? Like in the Rohingya community, our 30 artists have developed an entire renaissance of the arts, right? Entire rebirth of what the arts can be within their culture. So if we can do that, if we can have this cultural kind of rebirth, like a phoenix from the ashes, and with a primary focus on making sure the mental health and well-being and that resilience is at the core, that I truly believe that this conversation, like right now today that we had now, is a groundbreaking conversation and essential for the future of the history of the world. So I just have such gratitude to you, Mahmouda. You are an inspiration, and really so much appreciation. And for anyone who wants to know more information, please check out our work at Artolution, Artolution, like an evolution or a solution or a resolution or revolution, artolution.org. And again, all of the gratitude and appreciation to you and to 4M for being able to host us. So thank you so much, and I hope to talk to you soon, Mahmouda.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear viewers, we have discussed today with Max, and also like you were watching Foreign TV USA, we have mentioned like we have connection through Facebook, YouTube, and also other social media. And also you will find that below contact number. Feel free to contact with us. If you want to be with us, you can email us in this below number. So I am appreciating all of you who are watching with us, and please be with us, and thank you again to all. Now I am leaving from this program. See you again in our next program. Thank you all.